soul. Run lads, shoot lads, give us all a go. Run lads, shoot lads, you can do it, yes. Come on, Newport County, oh, bang it in the net.
And hello everybody, welcome to Taff's Word. Yeah, it's been a while since the last one, hasn't it? But where would you have found the motivation to talk about the way things have been going? Because you know me, I don't like to be negative unless I simply have to. And in the end, I was getting that. And I thought, right, I don't want to be one of these, I'm going to post negative shit about my club all the time, you know? So I waited till the end of the season. I was going to summarise the season, but I thought, right, Jardim had left beforehand. Right, let's hold on until we appoint a new manager. And we'll see what the vibe is there. So I can take the negative right through to a positive. So that's where this video is coming from at this particular moment. So before I start, I usually do this at the end. I want to do it now while I might actually have some people's attention, those who I haven't bored just yet. So plenty of comments. I want plenty of comments on this, and I want suggestions. Suggestions on what you'd like for me to talk about. What would you like to hear my opinion on? I have to get some of that from you guys because it will give me something to talk about and put more content out. Obviously, time is stretched for me. It is difficult for me to find the time to do it, but I will make the time to do it if I actually have something in my head. Right, okay, I want to talk about that today. So, here we go. End of the season. I didn't go to the last game. I went to Comic-Con in Liverpool. And before we start, no, I'm not a geek. Comic-Con, it had a lot of famous people there that I got to go and see. So, you know, that was a big part of it. And to be honest with you, the scene is great. But this isn't about Comic-Con. I'm just saying I was there in Liverpool. Funny enough, I was staying on close to the Wirral, which is where Tranmere are based. So Tranmere were in Newport while I was up in their place. So that was a bit weird, I know. But we lost 4-1. I wasn't at the game, so I can't comment on the performance, but I've heard enough testimony from that game to suggest that it was absolutely fucking shite again. Sorry for the swearing, for those who don't like it, but sometimes it's called for. Fucking shite was the theme of a lot of our games in the run-in. Now, even though we weren't mathematically safe, we were always really safe. So I think some of the players thought, oh, well, job done. Because you've seen that in the effort that was being made and the concentration levels, you know. They weren't on it. Although they went to Carlisle and caught Carlisle off guard and then completely fucking capitulated. I was there for that. I didn't do many away trips last season, thank fuck, because I've saved a little bit of money to take my wife away to more places and to fund my Comic-Con weekend as well. So I saved a little bit of money and didn't go to watch it. So yeah, I think I did the right thing there. I'm sure many people will agree. So to summarise the season, I've seen a lot of people say that all the players that we signed are shit. That's completely and utterly incorrect. I think we've got a lot of good, promising players there, and with the right manager and coaching team there, we'll get on to the manager appointment and the extra coaching staff. We'll get to that. But to say with the right guidance and coaches, they could kick on and become top quality League Two players and beyond, especially because a lot of them are still pretty young. I do feel as though some will be loaned out for the duration of the rest of their contracts. We've culled a fair bit that were out of contract. The only two sort of surprises there, Josh Martin, but he didn't do enough to secure a contract, but I thought we already had him for next season anyway. So, yeah, I'm quite disappointed because I thought there was a player in him, and you probably heard me mention that a few times right here before. Keban Rai, I'm a little disappointed with. I would have liked to have seen him, you know, maybe put out on loan, you know, give him another 2 years, not a big pay rise or anything like that. Put him out on loan in the National League or North or South. Yeah, no, didn't happen. But not to say I'm overly disappointed about that, but I'd have liked to have seen more from him. I think there still could have been a player in him, but you know, like as I said, I want comments. I want comments based on what I'm talking about as well. What do you guys think? Were you happy with that retained list? The players who we've offered contracts to, pretty standard. Personally, I think Clarkey and Wildig may sign, the two older ones. I do worry about Townsend and McLaughlin, although the appointment of the new manager and obviously Wayne Hatswell coming back to the club, will that give them something to think about when it comes to choosing whether they're going to stay here or not? Time will tell on that one, although I'm not overly confident of keeping all four. I think the older guys will just be happy to get a contract. I think Wildig, if he is to remain as the club captain, could sign. I think Clark, if he's to remain as the vice captain, could sign. But yeah, we could do with some of that experience staying on. But if Townsend doesn't stay, I definitely think we need to prioritise the goalkeeper position in the summer transfer window, to be honest. But time will tell on that one. But I am happy with the potential in the current squad, you know, with what's left and what's signed for next season. Because if you add in the right areas, we got the makings of a good League Two squad. So, moving on, because I do rattle on a little bit too often during these things. So, the manager, David Hughes. Now, I've just put a little video out on TikTok, so I wanted to just put a brief one purely about the appointment of the manager, but I'm just going to echo pretty much what I've said there. I know we've done this kind of thing in the past, where we've given a promising coach their first senior management role. Now, I think you look at Jardim, you look at Anthony Hudson, you look at James Rowberry, and they're the ones that scream out to say, oh, this is the same kind of thing. Okay, yeah, you're not wrong. It is the same kind of thing, to be honest with you. But the big difference there is when Hudson came, Hudson hadn't been a coach for overly long. But yeah, there was something promising about him. Harry Redknapp wouldn't stake his reputation on suggesting that he'd be great, you know, making the recommendation to us on his behalf. Unless there was something there. It was just a bit too soon for him. Obviously, he ended this. So when he came in, it was the 2010-2011 season. Dean Holdsworth had left. Tim Harris had taken over for a period of time, and then obviously it's took a step back once we appointed Hudson. Hudson finished the season strong. I think it was something like 7 out of 8 games he won. We flew up the table, and you know, we weren't that far away from the playoffs in the end, if I remember right. And we beat Gateshead 8-1 on the final game of the season away, which, yeah, amazing. So there was a lot of promise going into the next season, especially with some of the signings that we made. But it all went wrong. And he lost his job, rightly so. And Justin Edward came in. And as we know, the rest is history. And everything was great from that moment on. Obviously, the end of Flinney's reign, you know, we had to get the right man in. The thing that made Flynn so spectacularly successful at Newport County, I think, was his connection with the club and the city. James Rowberry was brought in, and with that in mind, his connection to the club and the city. And yeah, there's a lot of promise around him, especially for the fact that he took the reins from Flinney and sent us on a fantastic run of results. And we were one of the top players. There was a lot of excitement, you know, bubbling up. But it sort of fell on its arse. Like, we were looking for a top 3 finish, and we were looking good for it. And then that dream died. And then it was, right, okay, we'd have to rely on the playoffs. But even that dream died. Well, that wasn't even the dream. The dream was top 3. The backup was playoffs, and that fell away because the form had fallen off a cliff. The only good game we had was the away win at Port Vale, who eventually got promoted that season, because we were excellent that day. But for some reason, we couldn't replicate that performance in the games in and around that, and we ended up falling out the playoffs to the point that we ended up finishing 12th that season. I think it was 12th at least anyway. It was just a dismal, gutting end to the season. Rowberry then thought, right, okay, let's bring my own guys in. And he did, and it was worse, unfortunately, and it didn't work out for him. As I say, with Hudson, it was a bit too soon. With Rowbury, it was a bit too soon for him for a senior job. And I do wish him all the best with Wales and Stoke at the moment, because I do think he could be a success one day when he's ready for it. Moving on then, obviously we had Coughlin took over from Rowbury. We had the rest of that season and all of last season, which was, in principle, a good season. Obviously beating Wrexham and Swindon in and around a Manchester United home tie in the FA Cup drew up an awful lot of excitement, and times were good. Unfortunately, we went on an 8-game losing streak when we actually had a shot at the playoffs. And yeah, we actually had a shot. We were a few points away from it after winning at Wimbledon, who were in the playoffs at that time. And we thought, oh, we got a shot here. It fell off a fucking cliff edge then, didn't it? And that seems to be the theme at the moment. Things just keep falling off. We need to keep momentum when we get some positivity on the pitch, off the pitch and everything. When we get something positive, we have to fucking use it and build on it. Now, Jardim was never brought in to be the manager. Now, comparing him to Rowbury and Hudson is the wrong thing to do, because he was never brought here to be the manager. He was never brought here for Nelson Jardim's going to get his first shot at senior management. No, that was never, ever his role. His role was lead coach. The head coach fell through. Jardim had to step in. It's not what he was brought here to do. But he did it anyway. He took a lot of fucking stick, which I didn't like. It was never his job to do. He did it, and he stopped us from getting relegated. So I'll always be thankful to him for that, because it could have been a very difficult season. And the only reason it was a difficult season, and people slam Hugh Jenkins for this, Hugh Jenkins prevented this football club from going out of business again. And it doesn't matter what anybody, oh no, but this, oh no, but no. It is pretty fucking factual that Hugh Jenkins prevented this football club from going out of business again. You have a football club because of Hugh Jenkins, and it is as simple as that. Hugh obviously didn't do things in the best of ways last season, but we were favourites for relegation. No matter what happened in pre-season, at the beginning of the pre-season, before all the players came in, we were favourites for relegation. Every pundit who covers League Two had us in their bottom two, except for, I think, Gabe Sutton was the only one who didn't have us in the bottom two, but he had us pretty low down, and obviously he was right. We didn't finish in the bottom two, although the final table standings would suggest that we were close to relegation. We were never, ever physically or mathematically close. I think the closest we ever got at a meaningful part of the season, obviously after a few games have been played, a decent amount of games have been played, I think the closest we would ever to it was 6 points clear. We were never, ever in real threat of relegation. Although it was in the back of our heads that a bad run, or those 2 games that we played at home against Morecambe and Carlisle, one after the other, in the midweek, if we'd have lost those games, things could have been very, very different. But we won those games. No matter what, but we were lucky, or we were fortunate, or if on another night. The fact is, we won the games. If this, if that, if some buts, bollocks to it. The fact is, we didn't go down. We stayed up. Happy days. We still have a football club in League Two, in the Football League. We have managed to protect our financial situation, and from what I hear, we're in a good financial place. Not the best of financial places, but in comparison to other teams in our division, now if you look at some of their finances, there's some pretty nightmarish shit going on at some of these football clubs. We are far clear of any of that. But before Hugh took over, why do you think the Trust was so desperate to find someone for us? And they chose someone who they knew could do things without potentially putting the club in more debt or anything like that, or doing something that would have been a gamble. Someone who's proven to run a football club well, like Hugh Jenkins has done in the past, quite spectacularly with Swansea, as we all know. So, moving on now, new manager, Dave Hughes. Now, the big difference for me with Dave Hughes over the 3 managers that I've mentioned is the fact that he has been coaching for a lot longer. He's been at a number of clubs and done a number of roles. He's worked his way from Barry right the way up. I think he's been at Cardiff, he's been at Wales, he's been at Shrewsbury, to the point that he was headhunted by Manchester United to go into the position he was in. He is a rising star, as they say, because he's literally risen through the ranks, and he was at one of the biggest football clubs in the world, you know, looking after their under 19s team. Yeah, there's promise in that guy, actual promise. And to be honest with you, somebody somewhere would have given him a shot, and I'm glad it's us who's done it. Now, if you look at some of the other names that were being mentioned, like Michael Duff and Luke Williams, for example, yeah, you know, I'd have been delighted with any of them because they're proven top quality managers at our level, you know. So I'd have been happy with those. But Dave Hughes, the combination of him, the rising star that I've mentioned, along with Wayne Hatswell and Lee Kendall coming to the club, yeah, there's something quite exciting about that. So his first interview came across really well, talking about us being hard to beat, you know, energy, fighting spirit. Newport County, that is us. You know, difficult to beat, especially at home. Fighting, you know, Flinney, you know, the great quotes of Flinney. You know, we're not the most polished club, but the one thing we'll always do is we'll always fight. We lost that last season. This season, it looks as though they are going to drill that, especially with Hatswell there, who knows all about it. He was there throughout the fucking whole thing. The moment Flinney took over, through the Great Escape, and all the way through. And he even took over a couple of games after Flinney left, before he moved on himself. So, yeah, I'm fucking delighted to have him back. Someone who knows something about Newport County. Now, Lee Kendall is a great appointment as well, because his dad used to play in goal for us. And he's already tweeted out about how he used to come to Somerton Park and watch his dad play, so the club is in his heart. Great. Dave Hughes as well. He's from Wrexham though. Yeah, but if he does well, we'll let that one slide, I'm sure. It's like with Aaron Wildig coming here, you know, having played against us in that infamous final. You know, I'm sure we can forgive him if he does well, and I think he's done well enough. But yeah, I've got a good vibe about this. I genuinely think that this could be the thing that the catalyst to take us from the relegation conversation to the top half, pushing for promotion again conversation. But what we have to be is realistic, you know, about the club's stature, where the club is at this moment in time. We have to be realistic, because there are far more clubs in this division with greater resources than us. So pushing at that end of the table is never ever going to be a given for us. The supporters' trust ownership nearly bankrupted us to put us in that position in the first place. There's great memories, but they would have all been for fucking nothing if the club had gone out of business. So Hugh Jenkins has instilled a philosophy of bringing in young players to make profit, and there's already talk of Cameron Antwi maybe moving on for a fee. He's one that I think could have been promising for next year, so I'd like to see him stay. But if there's money to be had for any of these players, we have to cash in, because there are other players out there. You know, players without clubs, players we could take on loan to replace them for a season. You know, there's a lot going on out there, and there's a lot that we can capitalise on. But, you know, I'm glad I've waited to do this video, because if I'd have done it at the end, right at the end of the season, I'd have just been moaning about how bad we were. If I'd have done it just after the retained list, it would have been, yeah, but those four who we've offered contracts to, they're not going to stay here for this shit show. But now the manager is in, and there's promise about it. There's, I don't know, there's a vibe. And that vibe could be the thing that keeps some of them players. Am I expecting that we're going to re-sign all four? Possibly not. There may be one or two that'll go, and I think the two that will stay would be Wildig and James Clark, if they stay as captain and vice captain. But yeah, I'd love it if Townsend stayed, and I'd love it if Shane McLaughlin stayed. If we re-signed all four, that would be a massive, massive W, you know, in the transfer market, because we've retained our better players, you know, our most important players. And then if we can add to them and bring the best out of some of these younger players who we've got, that's where we could be in a better position, you know, and looking up and not down. So what do you guys think? I know I asked for comments, obviously things for me to talk about, but on this video as well. Tell me what you think, and I look forward to seeing what you guys have got to say. Thanks for watching. Thanks for putting up with me for 20 minutes. As usual, it's always appreciated. Cheer for now, and as always, up the county.